I think everybody's is fairly familiar with that. There have been several questions and what ifs, and we've all had, so Jackie has made a few clarifications to our policy. Can you go over those, Jackie?
Yes. Talking so fast. Okay, just based off of the questions that I got individually, came up with some options. It seems like if council wants to update the vacancy policy, there are about 3 possibilities that I see just based off the feedback I've gotten. One would be to clarify the policy in a way that does not address any kind of change to the mayor's role. It just clarifies and provides other solutions through, whether that be through taking the vote to an election or something else. That's one option. Another option would be to change the policy to allow the mayor to vote in the case of a tie. That's an option that would bring the mayor into the voting process. That would take care of some of the issues that we have whenever we have a 4-member council that can be divided. Typically, governing bodies and boards try to stay away from having an even number because for that reason. So that would take care of that if the mayor were to vote. And another option that I heard come up was just to leave the policy mostly as it is. And in that case, there's just a few tidying requirements that I would strongly recommend you do. They're not consequential. They just clean some unclear things up. So that's how I'll go through it. So the first language before council I would ask to look at is the blue language, which that would be, it's blue and purple, and it addresses the issue where in the case of a vacancy and the vacancy hits that 120-day clock. So we know that whenever there's a vacancy, the policy contemplates council making a decision within 120 days. It doesn't say what happens if you don't make a decision in that 120 days. So this sort of language would clear it up. It would say if no one is confirmed within 120 days of the vacancy, council, the city clerk shall automatically add the vacant seat to the next regular election. Or in a case where quorum is at issue, the clerk shall make provisions to hold a special election to fill the vacancy as soon as practically possible upon the expiration of that 120 days. So right now you have a trigger of 120 days. There's no consequence. There's no remedy. This would trigger an automatic requirement that it would go to a vote. Now, the general election is not going to cost the governing body anything because that would be, as Ty said, that would be added to whatever the names would be, or the vacancy would be added to our ballot at no cost. A special election would cost, but you only would have to do a special election in a situation where you're short quorum. You can't make any decisions. You can't govern. And it's been 120 days. Clearly there's something so wrong there that the remedy would be appropriate, that you would spend some money and have a special election to get that vacancy or those vacancies filled. So that would happen if the 120-day clock were hit. I only recommend this if you don't come up with a better solution for breaking that tie.
Right now, it just says it needs to be done with 120 days, but it doesn't say what happens if nothing happens.
Correct.
In the 120 days.
Right. So
you're proposing putting this language in.
that would, from what I've been hearing, that would clean that up with a consequence for not exercising within that 120 days. The next, as we go through the blue language, if you follow that path, you would, I'd recommend changing the requirement that candidates submit their information within 45 days, dropping it to 30 days. You have now, the body would now have incentive to get something done within a clock because the consequences are pretty serious. So why 45 days when you can do it in 30? You meet twice a month. That's just one under that third bullet policy. Skipping down to the selection process, item C is the next place that would change. That item, I really can't explain. That's just more cleaning up language. It was just more clear than whatever we had before, I think. That's just requiring that the mayor would share information provided by each interested citizen with all council members in a timely manner before the council vote. So, skipping down to confirmation, item B. Okay, so if within, this is another change where instead of right now, council has 75 days to confirm the mayor's appointment. I'm recommending dropping that to 30 as well, because again, why give 75 days when it could be done in a shorter time, especially when you're up against the 120-day clock. If in this case they were a tie vote, so they were 2-2 or 1-1, no, it was tied 2-2, the mayor could elect to leave the vacancy open until the next election. Right now, if there is a tie, it's somewhat vague in the policy, but the way we've been practicing it is the mayor submits another candidate. So what this language would do is it would give the mayor the authority to say, I'm going to wait till the next election. It just cleans it up even more, so you're not kind of through this process where you're deadlocked and the mayor doesn't have anybody who he would nominate and the council doesn't have anybody who they would confirm. It allows some sort of progress in that situation. Did you have a question? You have a kind
I have a questioning look. I have an evil eye on
Maybe
you.
I'm not being clear. What's your question?
Well, but I'm thinking we had other nominees in this instance, and we didn't go all the way through. We might have not ever come to, but I would think you would have to go through all the nominees before, before, sorry, Mayor, nothing personal, but you just don't get.
This is the policy. That's all. This is a discussion.
You just don't get to vote very often, and so am I wrong in thinking that, or
You're just one step ahead of me.
yeah,
And I'll-
she's smart. I love it.
You're way ahead of me here. So if I can answer the next, I think I might be able to
Okay.
get to your question. The next item right below that, so there's like item B under item C, it goes on to allow, the blue language is all we're paying attention to. It allows the mayor to present all candidates. It requires the mayor to present all candidates and council to follow the same confirmation process as set above until a nomination is confirmed by a majority of the council. So the language we had before.
Can you say that again? I missed something.
Sure. The mayor shall present all the candidates, that's everyone who applied.
Oh,
And-
you're talking about the blue.
The blue language
Okay,
under
okay.
C
That's
of
the
confirmation of
proposal.
replacement.
Okay.
The mayor shall present all the candidates and the council shall follow the same confirmation process as set forth above until a nomination is confirmed by a majority of the city council. So what that would do, taken together with the change in B, it would make it very clear that the mayor must present all the candidates. Now, because it's a nomination and not a announcement, the definition of a nomination, you have to have the nominating party have some sort of authority, some sort of decision-making quality, or it's not a nominating process. So by giving the mayor the authority to say that he would suspend nominations until the next general election, then he has some decision-making in that nomination. So otherwise, if you take out any decision-making, the mayor is literally reading the list, which anybody could do, but that's something you'd have to decide you wanted to do. And I just didn't hear that from this group. We could do that. But right now, the language that would be proposed in blue would be requiring the mayor to list all the candidates until a nomination is confirmed, or to suspend it altogether.
I have another question.
Sure.
Can I stick it in here now before I forget it? You mentioned the possibility of having a special election. I'm going to call it a special election as well, which would allow the community a vote, I am thinking.
Correct.
And yes, there would be a cost, but how much cost, how would it be handled? I mean, I would think it can't be set up like in the different, the different, I have to vote now. I used to vote over here all the time. Now I have to vote over at the rec center, which, it doesn't make any difference really, but I think is that the only two maybe, or are there more? But
There are only two.
Would they all come here and you just kind of have a little ballot box or what?
So there's different types. You could do a simple mail ballot, and then we'd just send it out to the registered voters, and then they could vote and send it back and wouldn't even have to have a polling place. Or if you wanted to, we could have a polling place and not do a mail-in ballot, and then it would probably be here at City Hall. Because I think we have like 800 voters or registered voters or something like that. We did contact the county because November there's a general election, and they said there is no charge for adding anything to the November election, but they would need to know by May. So
Yeah, that it would enter that election process, and it seems like it would cost different amounts based on whether you want
How
to
you do it, yeah.
Right. So that's basically, again, just reviewing, that's basically not having the mayor break any sort of tie or get involved in the voting process or anything, but cleaning up what exists and adding and clarifying, because it is not clear as the process stands, that the mayor would have to go through all the candidates.
So, is it question time now?
I'd like to present just one more. So imagine the blue language is not there, the blue and purple language is not there, and we just implemented the orange language. I heard from some people that the mayor should vote to break the tie. If you decided to do that, you would not need the purple language, because in that case, you'd be far less likely to be in a situation where you're deadlocked 2-2 with a tie. So you would ignore that purple. Again, I probably would still recommend reducing that amount of time that the application process is open, but you can talk about that. The mayor would receive, I guess the first orange language under policy just clarifies the mayor is to receive those applications before making a nomination. And then we go down to the selection process, section C. In this case, you may consider just requiring that the mayor collect the information and then making it available through the open record process, not being required to provide each council member with the information. That is more typical for a kind of a mayor's nomination process or a chair's nomination process. It might be something to consider. You don't have to, but I thought if you're going to change the language as to what the mayor does with the information he collects, that would be where you could change it. Under confirmation of replacement, section A, the mayor will recommend a replacement to the open council position after the 30-day initial application period has ended. The mayor may determine whether or not to continue to receive applications once the initial 30-day application period has ended. Again, that was another kind of tweak that where the mayor accepts applications for a window of time, but he may consider other nominees throughout. Not necessarily required to have the mayor break a tie, but again, this moves towards a process that gives the mayor more flexibility in the nominating process. It kind of makes it more of his process, his or her, whoever the mayor is at the time. And then under confirmation B, the mayor would vote to break the tie. If ever council acted to confirm and there was a tie vote, the mayor would vote to break the tie. And then he can, I'll just kind of speed through that he can choose whether or not to recommend a second nominee if the vote fails or not, or accept more applications. So at that point, if it's the mayor's process and he chooses to, or the first nominee fails, then the mayor could go back and accept more nominations, or he can recommend a second person from that list of qualified candidates. And then council may confirm or not, and in that case, the mayor can break the tie or not. This process actually creates the most predictability. It creates the most, it reduces the likelihood of a split vote. So that's the second option. And then the third option that I did also hear from certain members was, maybe there's nothing wrong with the policy. Maybe we just need to do a few tidying things. In that case, I would consider updating the time periods. It seems like we have a long 45 days, 75 days, and then you're up against 120 days. Maybe considering shortening that time period. And it's always good to say how to get in touch with the mayor under the selection process, the red language. Interested candidates should contact the mayor via mail, delivery to City Hall. And that's it. If you feel a policy is working, that's the least or the fewest changes that you would want to make. So those are just throwing back at you some ideas that I've heard, and in a way that can be worked into the policy if you decide to make any changes that way.
Let me try to summarize what you said there, and then you tell me where I'm wrong, okay? So, my understanding is the problem that we have is actually pretty easy to get deadlocked on this. Maybe easier than one might think. For example, if we have 10 candidates, and each of us like 2 of the candidates, the chance that 3 of us will have the same 2 are incredibly low. And if we don't, have a meeting or discuss it openly and kind of hammer it out, it's a really, really good chance we're going to be deadlocked. I mean, to simplify, if there are 2 candidates and, 2 of us like one and 2 of us like the other, guess what? We're never going to get anyone because it's actually incredibly, incredibly easy to come up with a deadlock. So what we're saying here is, well, it's so easy to come up with a deadlock, we need to have a system where we can stop this because we keep nominating people, that we keep kind of embarrassing them, maybe even embarrassing ourselves because we nominate them and a name gets put on TV and then they get hammered. So, we got to have a process that smooths this out because it's actually a lot harder to come with a consensus of 3 than you'd think. And the more candidates they are, and we had 6 this time, the harder it's going to be. Because unless a lot of us are going, I'm fine with 4 or 5 of them, we're going to get deadlocked if we're not okay with like 4 of them. We'd all have to be okay with like 4 of them, likely to find a one that would do. And it'd be nice not to like embarrass the other 3 before we got to the 4th one. So that's kind of the issue that we're having. And so you suggested that I can see 4 kind of ways to solve this. One is we can't figure it out. We go to a special election and we do it that way. One is essentially that the mayor gets to vote and break the tie, and so that's going to solve it. So that way only 2 of us have to agree on them, and it's likely that each of us only having one's pretty low, so the mayor breaking the tie would probably solve that problem. Another is to essentially go, hey, if we fuddle, we don't agree on those 2 people, we don't agree on those 2 people, we can leave it vacant and just roll with what we have now. And the other one is to just say, we're going to say it's fine, and maybe we'll adjust some dates, but otherwise we're just going to keep it going as it is. Is that pretty much
I did.
it?
I heard 4, but there
So
was...
I had the mayor decides, there's a special election, the mayor can decide to leave it vacant. I think that's a sub of another,
Yeah,
but
right,
it felt like a separate one because that's it's kind of a mayor decision, but that's what could happen.
It could, yeah.
And the fourth is not do too much.
Correct. That one, the mayor decides to leave it vacant, would be a sub of of going to a special election as
Right.
well.
I have to think about it, but I guess my initial thoughts, just to try to get the conversation rolling, is I do think the way we do it now has some problems that put us in some awkward situations that we don't want to be in. And I'm not quite ready to take a strong opinion on this right this second. Maybe somebody will convince me, but I am pretty confident that the way we do it now, because it just didn't happen this time. The last time this happened, we had the same kind of issue, and I just don't see why the next council that comes around that has to do it isn't going to run into the same problem. And to me, even if we could just decide on someone this time and go forward or whatever, I think it's going to be a problem the next time as well. And so kind of trying to figure out a way where we don't have this problem again. And Ty and Jack are like, man, every time this happens, we got to work through this. We just need to figure this out, right? I'm sure it's very annoying for them to have to go through it every time, because when you embarrass volunteers, essentially volunteers, it kills your volunteer base. And a city like ours that's so small that basically totally depends on volunteers, we cannot afford to embarrass a single one. And so therefore, we would just need to have a better policy that, we can't guarantee, we can't promise we're not going to vote someone down or something bad's going to happen, but we really need to have a policy that tries to avoid that if we can.
Mr. Mayor, one thing in some of the discussion up here, the council policy, it asks him to make it or we fill the role based on the mayor's nomination, and if it's the first, where we're only supposed to vote to confirm our number one pick. I agree with Councilmember Schroeder that it's very unlikely that with 6 candidates, the 4 of us up here, 3 of us are going to all pick the same number one candidate that we're going to say, yep, we're going to vote to confirm that one. And so that's one thing that's going through my mind. The second thing is when I started thinking about the election process and special elections, we've all run for office. We know what an incredible amount of work and time commitment it is to run for public office. And when you're in a position where you're trying to fill a vacancy, you're not running for even less than a year. And so I question the effectiveness of any.
And again, nothing personal, but I've been around a long time and been through a lot of mayors out here. Some really nice people. Some that I remember were not so nice. And that's why I'm so hesitant to just leave it to the mayor. And I know you don't get to vote very often, and it's probably, the world's not going to stop turning by any means, but the mayor could also load it up with his best friend or his minister or anything or along that line, which then throws the council off balance in a different way, because he's kind of loading up the votes.
In that case, though, he would already have to have loaded it with 2 of us that will say yes to whatever he says, right? He only breaks the tie. If 3 of us are against it, he wouldn't have, we're not giving him ultimate power. And also the mayor isn't, the people elected the mayor. If he's a bad guy and he is corrupt and he's loading the booth, I think he's stuck running every 2 years at this point. He's probably not getting elected again. So I'm not sure saying he shouldn't have any decision-making processes, because there's been bad mayors in the past. There's been bad council members in the past as well. I'm not super convinced. I'm open to other ideas. I'm not sure him breaking the tie is the best thing, but I think saying, well, the mayor shouldn't ever have some influence. He's an elected official. The people voted for him to do it, and he will have to run again and stand before everybody and explain his reasons for who he nominated, who he voted for breaking the tie, and the people will get to decide again on whether they thought that was any good or not.
And my only thought on the election, because again, I think, we were all elected by the people. Some of us not in great deal of, having a great deal of wiggle room. But it really, it's sort of the people's decision that we get to sit up here.
That's absolutely right.
And, and this is it's kind of an unusual situation because I have never seen you have 7 candidates for anything before here. That's a...
And I think the bigger the city we get, we'll likely get more candidates. Than it's not like, I'm not saying we're going to get 7 every year, but don't you think as the city grows, there will be more people that possibly would apply? I would imagine if the city of Wichita had an open vacancy and anybody that they wanted could apply, they might get 50 applicants.
We can only hope, that kind of thing.
I know at a particular time they had probably 10 for an open vacancy when Carl Brewer became mayor and left his council seat open. So I think there were 10 applicants for that position at that time. So, just so you know. Just so you know, my view on this issue of C, regardless of you change this or not change it, I would still share all the information with all council members because I just think that's important that you get as much information about each candidate that you can. Whether I like the candidate or not is to me a non-issue. You need to know, okay? So I would really prefer the policy say I need to do that, but I would do it regardless of what the policy says, okay? Unless it said I couldn't do it, and then I'd probably have an objection to the policy, but I can't imagine writing the policy that way.
Well, I think that's very, you did share with us and, that's not been the problem at all, of sharing who's doing and all of that. I wouldn't want it to become that either. And,
No, should.
Well, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this item. Part of me is wondering, what are we doing here? I left the last council meeting. That is the February 4th council meeting. This body passed a motion to table this agenda item, the appointment. Councilman Smith's motion was to table the appointment until the next meeting. That's what we voted on. That meeting has come and gone. That agenda item did not appear. I know Mr. Mayor gave his explanation or his thoughts about the process and how we arrived at where we are. Twice at that last council meeting, February 4th, verbatim, Mr. Mayor, you said that this appointment process was tabled until the next council meeting, the 18th. Hopefully we'll have a better result on 18th of February. That was at the end of the last meeting. I walked out of that meeting thinking, okay, some people up here, things didn't go the way they wanted, okay, so we're going to give it a week to table it. I voted against that motion. I didn't think we should table it. I think we should have finished our process. In my view, right now we're in the middle of the policy. Mr. Mayor, you presented these 6 candidates to us. At the beginning of your statement, you said that each of the candidates bring lots of skills and abilities. You said each would be a great asset to the city. Those were your words. You said that of the 6 candidates. So We're hearing a lot of language used about embarrassment, about somehow our policy here has steered us into this vast unknown, and I think that where we are is in the middle of the policy, in the middle of the process. You said you're not going to make any more nominations. I mean, is that still the case? Is that
Until we have a consensus
We're
of
ready.
how we move forward.
okay? I mean,
And I'm not saying what that is.
Okay.
That's why we're having this discussion. How
You know,
do we move forward?
a concern I have here is that there's good politics and bad politics, right? There's what I hear is somewhat of pushing off some maybe ill-conceived political decisions, some lack of leadership, some responsibility being pushed onto the policy when that's actually not the case. There's political, tactical mistakes. There are little details. As I recall the last meeting, the way things went, I was surprised by a number of things during the meeting. I was surprised we called up the first candidate for questioning. I didn't even know who the first candidate was going to be until I walked into this chamber. Mr. Mayor, you were asking us for, who we favored, ranked the candidates, all that. You didn't share who you were favoring. I didn't know until I walked in here and saw the picture of Mr. Welch on the screen. And my initial thought was, we're going to see the pictures of all the candidates cycle through on the screen. That didn't happen. We didn't have a discussion about all the candidates or a type of forum venue to, we could have done a lot of things in your position, Mr. Mayor. You could have done a lot of things to seed the ground. If you favored somebody so much, you could have kind of made the case for them. I mean, I'm not your political advisor, but I don't think it's good form to come up here and kind of suggest we need to make all these additions to the policy or change our policy when my impression is we were in the middle of the policy. I don't think we change horses midstream here, right? I mean, I think we should finish that out. This policy has some vagueness to it. There aren't specifics about how things should go. I think that's a good thing in law. I think ordinances, things that guide this kind of policy, it has to be intentionally vague, because if we start nailing down all these specifics, I mean that's fraught with peril as well. There needs to be freedom for you and the council members to make judgment calls and to share our thoughts and all that, and the way we interpret some of these statements about the nomination, the selection process, there is vagueness here. But I mean, I guess I don't think it's a good idea for us to have this discussion and talk. I mean, I am fine with it if this body wants to change the policy on how we fill vacancies in the future. I'm open to having that discussion and hashing it out. But this just feels like completely the wrong time to do it. I mean, as I understood where we were in the process, we were, and also there's some assumptions up here that council members are making, assumptions about maybe there's one lingering candidate that's favored, or maybe we'll disagree on all six, or that those are assumptions. We don't know that. There's assumptions that are being made that because the first two failed in the vote, that somehow that's going to happen for the other four. I mean, we don't know. There's things that, I mean, something as simple as Mr. Mayor, before you called for the vote, you could have surveyed the council members up here and asked us how we were going to vote ahead of time, right here, before everybody, and we could have giving you, well, gee, I'm leaning against this person, or I'm leaning for this person, or we could enter a discussion about the particular candidate before we even vote up here. I mean, that's the whole purpose of our body, that discussion.
Did I not offer opportunity for discussion?
You opened it for discussion, but you didn't survey us how we're going to vote. You seem to be interpreting our vote as somehow this is a point of great embarrassment and shame or something, and I don't view it that way. Maybe politically for what you were hoping for your nomination, but I don't agree with the language characterizing it as is that what we're at? Where if we're not voting for your candidate, that's going to be an embarrassment. I mean, that's kind of
I think
how
the
this is
emphasis
going.
wasn't the embarrassment for the mayor; it was the embarrassment for the candidates.
Well,
Embarrassment for the candidates and the city. I've got.
that's your opinion. That's your opinion. Not everyone shares that opinion.
It isn't just my opinion. It's the opinion of citizens that have sent me emails and had conversations with me as well. I am not alone on this.
Okay.
I'm not telling you just because Jim Benage thinks it's an embarrassment to Jim Benage. I don't care about that. I care about the best things for the city. And I do
Right.
not have any desire to embarrass the city in this fashion or any other fashion. Okay? And that's my concern here.
Okay.
Now, these proposals, yeah, I had some discussions with Jackie and with Ty about some of this stuff. So this is new ideas to me. I've not seen all these things. Okay? So these aren't just Jim Benage's ideas on this paper. Okay?
I understand that, and I agree that some of these seem like they've got potential. They're good ideas. That, like I said,
So
I think this is an inappropriate time to go through that process.
you would be okay with revisiting something like this after this nomination's filled? Is that
Sure, that's what I've said. Yes.
And when I left, and I was asked a question, and I don't remember who asked it or what have you, but we had, 4 more candidates that, we didn't talk about or anything else. And the question that kind of came to me was, well, if I had done that, because to me, that would have been parliamentary procedure was, if you've got that many, it had to be very embarrassing for those 4 that didn't even get mentioned on the mic as well. We just
That's a good
didn't
point.
see them. We just didn't see them. But, I had that uneasy feeling, and someone asked me if I had seen that or we'd done that, and I go, I don't know that it would have changed my vote, but I didn't even get the chance to do that, to change my vote, kind of thing. And I had some pretty strong opinions on a couple of those as well. They wouldn't have gotten my vote. So I just felt like we just didn't finish what we were supposed to do in the first place.
I think what's unclear is that our policy doesn't actually specify what we're supposed to do. The way that I interpret this policy is that the mayor's supposed to review the people that come in and then say, he's supposed to put people up for nomination that he thinks are most appropriate for the nomination, and not so much that he's just supposed to go down the list 1 through 6, and basically facilitate the process. Because if that were the process, I don't know that it would be called a nomination, right? He would just be, facilitating the candidate review process instead of actually putting his name behind that person as, hey, this is the person that I'm nominating, that I'm standing behind is the person that should be sitting up here on city council. And so I think that's maybe a little bit where the process is currently broken, is if the mayor's done nominating people because, he's at a point where he's not yet ready to put his name behind anybody else, then we can't actually move on to the next person because our policy doesn't say that we're supposed to just vote on every candidate that applies. It only allows us to vote on people that are put forth in a nomination by the mayor. And so that's where I think this policy is actually broken, because if the mayor is not currently in a position to want to further nominate people, then we have no further remedy as to how this council vacancy is going to be filled. And we're going to hit that 120 days, and the policy also doesn't say what happens when we hit that 120 days. And so I understand why our city attorneys brought this before us with concern, and it's because it doesn't clearly outline what next steps are. And to that extent, something has to be decided, or I guess the council seat just doesn't ever get filled until the next regular election would put somebody up there.
Because the mayor does not have to nominate anyone, does he?
It does say the mayor shall nominate, but that's kind of a weird kind of statement, because is the shall that he shall select someone to nominate, or is it that no matter what, he has to get someone's name out of his mouth?
Right.
So, I mean, we all would say that it's written to say that the mayor shall have the decision-making of the nomination process.
Okay, we take that interpretation because of the term nomination, that's kind of the assumption that there's some authority. Because if he has to nominate them, then it's, as Justin would say, he's just the guy that goes through.
It's a candidate review process at that point, not an actual nomination.
Right.
So I see the ambiguity, and I understand the concern and the problem here.
Excuse me, I left my water in the executive room.
Mine's not. I'm hitting the diet.
Is it okay if we just take maybe a brief break? Or
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Oh,
Here's Nick.
all right, well, that's fine. That works, thank you.
Another thing that you mentioned that I think we should try to suss out a little bit is the public discussion over candidates, and this is a challenge as well. You know, whenever we talk about staff, we have a special meeting. We in privacy, because we don't want to say, "Well, I don't like Ty, smells bad, we need to fire him," in public, right? You know, that would not be a good thing to talk about in public. And so if we're going to talk about, if we have a full-blown public process where we debate all the candidates, and I go, well, I'm obviously not voting for Gary, he's wearing an OU sweatshirt. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, go Huskers, you know, I can't even believe it, right? I mean, you know, we wouldn't want to say those, you know, there's a reason we go into executive session when we talk about the good and the bad of people. We don't want to talk about all the things we don't like about people publicly that might push us to vote against them. So maybe, you know, Gary cheated me at cards one time, and so I will never nominate him. Obviously, Gary and I have never played cards together, but let's say we did. I do not want to tell you all in front of the whole world, and neither does Gary, that he cheated me in cards one time. And so, sort of the open discussion thing, I guess I would like clarity on what we're thinking that looks like, because it's clear, and when we're talking about staff, we do not talk about those, just, you know, air all those things publicly. Are we wanting to just talk about all the good and the bad of each of the candidates publicly like that? Or, I mean, I have concern about that.
If that's true, I'm not sure that we'll get the same number of applicants in the future for this type of position.
You know, part of evaluating problems and deconstructing the problem is looking at kind of the extreme side of that. I mean, the extreme side of that is that we have nothing. We say nothing. We just have our vote, and we just vote.
Well, the mayor tried to balance that by each of us individually
Right.
talking to him to
Sure.
try to say it wasn't just a silence and vote, and it wasn't a public airing of what we all like and don't like about everyone. And if you think there's a different way to do that, I'm certainly open to.
Yeah, I'm not advocating that. I don't think that would be a good way to do things, but, you know, I mean, good politics, bad politics, right? I mean, we're talking about where do we strike that balance, okay? I mean, there's lots of things that could have been done within this policy.
Well, and what would you recommend specifically that we do before the next nomination that would be better?
Well, again, I'm not a political advisor, right? I think if the mayor had surveyed how we were going to vote before we voted, and if it looked like he wasn't going to have the votes for his candidate, he could have said, hey, well, you know, those of you that aren't going to vote for this person, why not? I mean, right then and there, you put the pressure on those that aren't going to vote to give their reasons. And that naturally will fall into a discussion. The mayor could, okay, so from my point of view, I don't think the mayor made a strong case for his candidate at all. He cited a couple of things that, with the one exception being appearing in the last election, the qualities he cited, in my opinion, apply to virtually all the candidates. There was nothing that he was championing in terms of setting this person apart from the others. I didn't hear that. As part of me, that as a citizen, as a council member, I want to hear that. I want to hear, I think the mayor should come up and make the case that this is just the best person, and give me a litany of things and kind of unique qualities of this person, why they're qualified, why we should all vote for them, right? Like, I think that could have gone a long way. And then saying, hey, well, you're not going to vote for this person, why not? Don't you know X, Y, Z? That's what again, that's good politics, right? That takes some leadership. That's where I thought we were kind of going to go. Instead, we got just, hey, have a discussion. It's like, well, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction that we had as a council. I think
I
fell short on that.
I tried to get us to talk.
Well, you asked the question, and frankly, I thought that was a tactical mistake.
Asking a question.
When only one, I thought it was a mistake to call up one candidate when only the one candidate. There were two candidates present out of the 6, and we called up the first one, but the second one wasn't here.
So you want to bring all 6 in and interview them all?
I'm saying if I had no idea that we were going to call them up and ask questions at all. I wasn't thinking that was even something we were going to do. I thought we were just going to talk about it.
There was no plan to do that.
I know that. I know it happened naturally. I'm just saying. And, we voted when he was standing at the podium. I thought that was a mistake. You're talking about embarrassing and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was a tactical error. He probably should have been asked to go sit down before we voted, because that was kind of awkward. I understand the human side, the human component of being embarrassed or having this awkwardness. But part of that is, leadership up here kind of directing to kind of set things in place. And
so far, you're suggesting the mayor needs to give a better pitch for the candidate.
You asked my opinion. Yeah.
And the second one is to not have the candidates come forward to the podium.
No, that's not what I said. I said I thought that was a mistake to only have one when.
So I'm asking.
It's either all or nothing with the candidates, right? I think that they should have been treated as evenly, as fairly as possible. All of them. I don't know if they were formally invited to come to the meeting or not. I don't recall if that was even. There's all kinds of details we could talk about, but
I'm trying to get clarity on this.
Are you the mindset that each of these candidates is to be considered equally even at the nomination process? That the mayor shouldn't be using his discretion in who he thinks the best candidate is?
Well, you have that. Of course you have that.
But it sounds like you're saying that
I'm not a rubber stamp for the mayor's nomination.
Well, I understand that. I'm not asking for that. Okay, but I'm trying to understand what you would want us to do differently. If you want to have a discussion, we'll have a discussion. We'll have that discussion this evening about these candidates if we need to do that. I personally think that's a mistake, and the reason I think that's a mistake is just kind of like Joel alluded to. It goes back to the human resource issue. That you don't drag the issues of human resources into the public forum. That's just wrong, I think. We don't do that when we're hiring people. We don't parade around the whole company and say, hey, do you like this person or do you not like this person?
It doesn't.
As a manager, I make that decision. And when I make that decision, everybody works with that decision. Okay? And that's the way managers work. And I think you've been in some management positions and you have some experience in that.
It doesn't have to be that type of situation. we're talking, about a pretty, there's a lot of ways you could go about doing that, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to get those
You
specifically.
could have a meet and greet types. You keep asking me these specific things. I'm willing to answer your questions, but I'm also, I'm a little hesitant because you're asking these really specific things hypothetically about what we should have done. I kind of don't want to continue doing
not
that.
what we shouldn't have done. What we should do going forward to make it the best we can to get through the process.
My opinion, we're in the middle of the process. As I understood the process and the policy.
So I'm fine with. I think your point of not changing the policy officially like this mid-nomination is an understandable thing, right? You're going, hey, we're right in the middle of it. We know it's bad. Let's say, let's pretend we even all agree on that. Let's pretend we all agree it's bad, need to be changed. But hey, we're in the middle of it, and we can't just be changing policies when we get halfway through things. I can fully agree, and I would probably even vote with you that we should not change this policy mid-nomination. I can see why that could be a struggle. What I'm trying to figure out is what we need to do going forward to get this a seat filled in the best way possible.
Okay. To answer your question, my opinion is that the mayor should make another nomination of the remaining candidates, and we vote. But that's the policy.
You talked about the policy having flexibility, and so we can discuss if there's a better way to do it. But you just want them to go down the list.
Well, presumably that's exactly what the policy prescribes.
I think that's where I maybe read the policy a bit differently, and I don't think the policy prescribes that. That's not my interpretation of what a nomination would mean.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, we're hung up over the definition of what nomination is?
I think several of us have voiced that.
Yeah, I think that's some of what our city attorney was highlighting in her discussion when she was preparing these recommendations to us.
All right, so
So I was trying to figure out a way to move forward through this nomination. Just, how can we do it? Justin and I see the nomination as, the mayor, he doesn't just have to go through the list. He's not forced to go through this. That was our understanding of it. Justin described it as it's not just I'm facilitating it. It's actually like he has some choice there. That's how Justin and I are understanding it. I don't know if Diane said one way or the other. That's how the mayor is understanding it as well. If he doesn't want to nominate anyone else, what are we going to do?
We would need to change the policy to say that he's required to nominate somebody else, which I think is what brings us to the review of the council vacancy policy.
And I'm not even saying he won't nominate anyone else. He's never told me that, so I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying.
I think your comments earlier maybe led me to believe that you weren't prepared to nominate anyone else at this time. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Okay, so my view of this is that this body needs to have consensus to how we're going to go forward with this. And until we have that consensus, I am not willing to make another nomination because I do not want us to continue to repeat this process where we make nominations and reject them over and over and over. I'm not asking for a rubber stamp, but we should have that consensus among us what we're going to do. And I don't think we have that, okay? And if changing this helps us get to that consensus, okay. If not changing this doesn't help us helps us be to consensus, then that's okay too. I'm fine either way. But I think we all recognize there are problems with this policy, and that's why it's brought up, because there are problems with the policy. But if we're not going to change it, okay, then that's part of our going forward
The hard
plan.
part here is trying to change it in the middle.
Yes, I
of the
understand.
process.
You're absolutely right. It's a very valid point to say that because that's that's one of the errors that have been made in elections. They try to change election rules in the middle of an election. That's not legal to do that. You can't even Supreme Court's been very firm about that. And I get that, and so I'm not so much advocating for it. I'm saying it's a possibility, but if we want to take that off the table and talk about other options, we can certainly do that. Okay?
Well, I agree that we need to do some cleanup on this. I mean, obviously, we need some cleanup on it.
Yeah, I think it's clear that this process is broken, and I don't think it hasn't been exercised often. And you know, the times it has, it's causing some things that aren't great here. And so I think there is a real opportunity with this. But I get it. Changing the rules in the middle of the game is not something anybody wants to do.
Right.
Probably not even Jackie.
Okay, so do we want to table discussing this for another workshop time?
I think it's pretty clear the changing of the actual policy is not going to go forward. Am I right about that? I think for right now until after this is over, or what do you? I don't know. I could probably be convinced the other way, but I understand what Jeff is saying here. I mean, it does seem weird to change the policy mid thing. So if he's firm on it, I probably would have a hard time arguing against it because like I understand why we would do it. It kind of sort of makes sense to me in this particular process, but like as a general principle, I agree. It does not seem like you should be doing that, changing policy mid thing. So I mean, if Jeff thinks that's the way to go, I would really have to side with him on that.
Okay. I mean, that's where I currently stand. I mean, I wouldn't, yeah.
I'm open to it if we can't find a better path forward. I think it's important for us to fill the 5th seat up here. It's important for us to have another council member, and if changing this is the right tool to facilitate that, I would be open to it, even though it's maybe not as ideal as I'd like it to be. But I wouldn't necessarily rule it out if we're not able to find a better path forward.
Okay, so we're going to table that for possible discussion in the future, right? Is that what we're saying?
Well, table the, okay,
Table the discussion.
but continue discussing our path forward on filling the seat.
Right, discuss path forward and fill the seat, but this is not part of that path.
Right.
Right.
Right? Be
Okay.
clear. Okay? All right. I'm fine with that. Okay. So, I'll lay out some options for you that I see, and we can certainly consider other options. And we've talked about some of this already, so this is not anything new. We can openly discuss and interview each and all candidates until a consensus is reached. Like I said before, it runs the risk of dragging the candidates into a public discussion about them personally. It's almost like discussing an employee human resources issue in public. It's very bad form, but if that is what the council desires, then let's have that discussion. We can modify and nullify the governing body vacancy policy. We've already had that discussion just now. And we can decide to hold a special election to fill the vacancy. And that's expensive for the candidates and time consuming for everyone, and wouldn't fill the position until at the earliest, August 4th. If we don't get more than 3 candidates, because that forces a primary, correct? Okay. So, and that August 4th would be a free of charge to the city if you did it on August 4th. It's just that's the next election that Sedgwick County will be conducting. So this is open for discussion, and we've already been through some of this, but what do we want to do here? Do we want to discuss all these candidates in the public forum?
Can anyone think of a fourth option?
Okay.
If there's other options, I'm interested in that too. Yes, I'm not trying to limit the options. These are just ones that I put laid out.
To all of you, Mr. Mayor, to my fellow council members, I want to, I am sensitive, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sensitive to your concern, particularly of the people involved. I am sensitive to that. I'm sorry if maybe something I said maybe came across that I somehow am dismissive of that. I'm not. I share your sensitivity towards the human factor here, right? Everyone who's involved, from the candidates to us up here, the city staff that's here, the emotional component, the human component. I'm keenly aware of that. So please don't misunderstood anything I've said to somehow cut against that. I am sensitive to that. Okay. Now that being said, I'm up here, I'm thinking this process through, I'm trying to think, Councilman Schroeder, you asked a great question a couple times now about, well, what can we do going forward, and also, Mr. Mayor, you're obviously, one of your top priorities is protecting the sensitivities of everybody. I appreciate that. I just want you to know that. I genuinely appreciate that. And so I'm thinking this through here. I'm looking for, well, how can we move forward? So let me just give me a moment here to just kind of collect my thought, because I have a potential. I don't know if it's a solution or not, but let me just think through this a little bit here. So when it came to the discussion at the last meeting about, we discussed rationale or our reasonings for how we voted. I guess what I want to kind of land on is, in regards to the 4 candidates that remain, of the 6, the 4 that we haven't voted on yet, in terms of this discussion of disqualifiers, because I mean, in some sense, that's kind of where my mindset kind of went when trying to evaluate candidates, okay, in my mind. So, would it be helpful to know that of the 4 remaining candidates, I don't see any those disqualifiers that we talked about, that I mentioned at the previous meeting? Mm-hmm. So what I'm sharing with you and with everybody is, based on everything that I know right now and the discussions we've had and all the information I'm aware of right now, I don't have any disqualifiers for the 4 remaining candidates. Does that help?
I have shared with the mayor privately which ones I was okay with, which was most, and which ones I was not, right? So of the remaining, there are definitely a few left that I would also be okay with, even though I was okay with the first 2. If that helps the mayor, I don't really want to mention who they are or whatever, but the mayor does know specifically who those are and who they're not.
Okay.
So is that what we're talking about, that we all just tell you privately?
Well, that was the original proposal, but there were some concerns with that, and I get that, that's fine.
And Justin, did you say at the last meeting you talked to the mayor as well?
Yes, I've also spoken to the mayor and shared thoughts with the mayor.
I've spoken to the mayor, you spoke to the mayor, Jeff's clear, Councilman Elshoff, I'm sorry, I'm getting that wrong like crazy.
This is a little more informal.
He's made his thoughts clear. I don't know if maybe you've already made your thoughts clear to the mayor. And maybe you could, do that however you want. But I think at that point, I assume, Mr. Mayor, you would have enough information to go forward at that point?
I think I do now. I feel that there's enough there that we can go forward. So I appreciate that, and we'll make the nomination.
And I'm sure if Councilman Wood wanted to talk to you, you would be more than thrilled to.
I will discuss it with any of all of you anytime you want.
Better be still open.
So you have my number. You're welcome to call me anytime, day or night. But probably not midnight. It's probably not a great time. Text me at midnight. I won't answer it. So, okay. So I feel that we do. I feel personally that we have a consensus to go forward.
Do we want Jackie to continue to work forward with
the vacancy policy?
With this policy, and maybe even come down to having, instead of going from the orange to the blue and what have you.
Well, unless anybody has some ideas to the contrary, being as it's all fresh on our mind, maybe we could give her our inputs and our thoughts about these different ideas, so she could draft that. But I'm not trying to push that issue. I mean, it's
I think
it's
after
certainly
this,
something we need to do.
yeah, I think once we're through with this appointment, I definitely want to review this. I think we worked it out the way it is fine amicably. I think it's going to all turn out fine, and a year from now, this isn't going to be a big deal. But I think making this a little more clear would be better, and so I would like to revisit it. And maybe it's these changes, maybe there's even some more adjustments, but I think we should. That's my opinion.
Very good. Okay. I think that concludes that portion of our workshop. I think we can move on to the marketing portion. And the manager sent out the request for proposals to marketing all land owned by Bel Aire. 4 companies responded. And so how many companies would you like to interview? And is there a date that works for interviews?
So
But go ahead.
I was just say I spent quite a bit of time going through all 4 of the proposals, and honestly, I found them all to be pretty generic and non-differentiating in a lot of respects. And so, one of the things I think it actually would be helpful to get to know the folks that we would be working with directly a little bit better, and use that as a key way to have those firms differentiate themselves. When it comes right down to it, the interpersonal aspect of this engagement, I think, is going to be really important as we select a real estate partner. And so I think it would be worth the investment of 30 minutes a firm to talk with them, ask them some questions, and hear what they have to say before, since they're only for the applied. I think that's really feasible and reasonable to do.
I'm perfectly fine with that. I did score them, and I did come up with two of them that were much higher than the other 2. But that's just my personal opinion, and so it's a group effort here. So
Not to
but-
put anybody down, whoever did the scoring, but that's not how I score
that's fine.
people in the real estate business, whether it's builders, real estate and what have you. The questions were, I don't know, I'm not going to come up with a word now, but I'm very specific with them. You've heard me talk. I talk their language, and and even when I was going through the information, I was like you, man, who did this? You gave this to the secretary. Nobody did that, honestly.
And I want to clarify, I wasn't saying that anybody did a bad job with their
No,
RFP.
they weren't bad.
That's not what I was saying at all. I was just commenting that I have some maybe more specific criteria that I have in mind that wasn't answered in the high level generic proposal, and you also can't address the interpersonal aspects of that
You're never gonna do
relationship
that.
in a proposal like that, and
Never gonna do
you just can't. And so I appreciate the information. I found it helpful, and so I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't saying that I didn't appreciate that information, because I did.
Well, but it wasn't enough to make the decisions on.
Oh, certainly
Yeah.
not.
Right.
Certainly not.
That we need to make. And I've had some conversations with Ty on this, because if I get a chance to talk to him alone, it gets very specific kind of thing. And I think you agreed with me that, some of that questioning and what have you, it gets all generic. And, so somebody needs to have a real opinion and tell me something. But that turns back to us too. I was telling him, there are some things, we got all these maps and what have you, but, we've got some things. We need for them to know where the schools are, because there are some restrictions around schools about what can be where. If we want, we have all of our I don't know what to call it, but over there, the industrial types of things. I don't want a McDonald's in the middle of that either. They need to know, this has already been done. There's a whole lot of area we haven't decided, and we kind of need to say. We kind of need to say, hey, we want homes to here, and, here's where we're going to put businesses. Here are the best places to put businesses, because we got some prime real estate, but, I also don't want somebody to build a house over there in the middle of it.
Yeah.
If I may, I just wanted to make a public disclosure about one of the persons involved in this. So I wanted to share that one of the agents for Wigand, Ben Gartner, he's a personal friend of mine.
Okay.
I wanted to just make sure that was clear and open publicly. And I just wanted to briefly characterize our friendship. So I've known Ben since approximately 2007. When I first met him, we were in a Bible study together and a church ministry together. I have not been he's not what I would consider a close personal friend. I consider him a friend. But he's somebody that I've grown distance, friends-wise over the years. So on January 29th, I believe that's the date, he actually called me up. I didn't even realize he was working for this company. We literally hadn't spoken for a couple of years at that point. Certainly not face-to-face. He called me up. I was glad to hear him. He said, hey, I'm working for Wigand. We saw Bel Aire's RFP come across. We're looking at it, and our conversation was brief. He did ask me a couple of very general questions along the lines of, what's Bel Aire's interest? I answered very generally, just about, we've got this land and we want to sell it, and that was kind of our conversation, and the rest of that conversation was personal in nature, kind of catching up. He did, since we hadn't spoken for a while, and he did invite me to lunch. He did purchase my lunch. We went to a sub shop. He bought us sandwiches. It was very much, hey, we hadn't seen each other in a while. Hey, I'm in the business, so it was very, he's a distant friend, but I wanted to just make sure that was clear. All that information was up front, that I don't view that as a conflict of interest going forward. However, if anyone up here has any concerns about that or wants to ask me questions, I will be as open. I've shared just about everything I can think of about that. If you have any questions or problems, please let me know. But I don't think going forward that's a problem. So
I think that it's in a community as small as Bel Aire, it's going to be difficult to not have some knowledge and personal relationships of people within these companies.
If I can follow in right behind him.
And I will allow you to do that, but just in the efforts of full disclosure, I will also, because I've already said this before, but I do personally know the Vice President of Commercial Development for Wigand, and while he is a friend, I wouldn't say close friend, but I do know him, and we do talk on a first-name basis quite often. He is a member of our same church I go to. The same is true with a Vice President of Commercial Development for the Martins Group. So again, we are on a first-name basis. I wouldn't say he's a close friend, but we do know each other and talk with each other. Mr. Ted Branson, who is in the Landmark Commercial. I knew Ted when I was a young man. I didn't know him really well. He was really a very good friend of my brother-in-law's. But I did know him, and I knew he was in the real estate business then. I haven't talked with Ted in probably 40 years. But so to say that I know him is almost like saying I know Mike Pompeo. I've talked with Mike Pompeo. I've had pictures taken with Mike Pompeo. But it'd be a real mistake for me to ever say I know Mike Pompeo. Okay. So yeah, lots of people we talk to, we've met, but we don't really know. Right? Okay. So
Well, mine is.
Your turn.
We're all going to need to turn here, I guess.
Right.
Mine is kind of similar. I I've known Grant Tiedemann for, I think I remember Brad being born, actually. When he was much younger and what have you, we would, not meeting person to person, but we met in a lot of different organizations and those kinds of things. Super guy. You will not find anyone more honest than him. I will tell you, he is a stand-up guy, unless something has happened to him, because I haven't seen him in probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, somewhere in there, kind of thing. And the only thing I know about Brad is that he is, the couple or three times I've met him, he is a lot like his dad, except more talkative. Grant's a man of few words. So, because I thought the same thing as when I got in there and I went, oh my gosh, I haven't seen him in so long, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say I also happen to know Ben Gardner from church-related activities. Of course, I don't have a financial interest in anything that he's doing, so I don't view that as a conflict of interest. But I do happen to know the same person that Jeff does. So
I don't know anybody. I'm not friendly. not that I'm currently aware of. Regarding the, how we should move going forward. I've never sold land, right? So I started from a pretty pathetic beginning. So I talked to the people that I knew that knew the most about it, and got a bunch of questions that they specifically had. You need to know this. You need to know this. You need to know this. And I, looked at what they had here, and it goes, yeah, pretty much none of this almost is answered in these, little packets they gave us. My understanding is there's 5 big hitters of these people in this area, and the 4 we're considering, and the one we just had. So it's not like there's a big company we missed or anything like that. So the specifics of what we would need to know from each company, my understanding is we would need to talk to them. We need to know who's working specifically with their company on it, and there's a whole bunch of other questions. I don't need to go anywhere, but I just felt like I couldn't even answer anything particularly helpful until I interviewed them, and even after that, we'll decide whether I know anything more after that. But I definitely, prior to that, I think we're going to have to talk to each of them
So I
to
think
try
I
to
need
get an
an
idea.
interview date. I'm just looking at my calendar, and don't say just because it's my calendar. My calendar, I have March 5th available. Unfortunately, there's a soccer game that night, but I wouldn't miss the soccer game if we have to have that meeting then. I don't really have an opportunity before that, unfortunately, myself, personally, unless you want me to Skype, because there's going to be a time, part of that time I'm out of town. So,
Mr. Mayor,
anybody have any other suggestions? Yes?
can I address the conflict of interest
Certainly.
questions? None of the information anyone presented met anywhere near the standard for conflict of interest, but it's just good to put it together with these statements on the record that everyone feels that they would consider the candidates on their merit, and that their relationship or their knowledge of these people would not influence their decision. All council members would be able to make an independent decision based on the facts and the application presented before them, and not on any relationship at all.
Absolutely.
Everyone nodding.
I think we could all consent that, at least I can't speak for everybody, but I would consent to that, yes. Okay. Good point.
March
The
5th.
other thing.
Oh, are we going with that date?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Do we want
I'm
to do
okay.
that?
I was just going to say that's fine. with
that day
me.
works for me.
Works.
What
Yeah.
day is it?
It's a
Wednesday.
Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
Okay.
Right.
It's probably fine. My phone is on the charger on my dresser.
Okay.
And what time are we thinking for that?
What's a good time? And that's really, for us.
6:30.
You want to do 6:30? I'm in Newton that day, but yeah, 6:30 would work. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. Okay, so 6:30 on the 5th of March. We'll invite the 4 groups out, and 30-minute presentation. and we'll have to have some discussion time with each of them as well. So do we want a 30-minute presentation, or do we want a 10-minute presentation and a 20-minute discussion?
Probably try to complete the whole thing in 30 minutes. So we'll allow them maybe a 10-minute presentation. You've already seen their proposals, and then the
Right.
rest, majority of time for questions.
Very good, okay. So I'll let you decide the order of who's who on that.
Okay.
I do also want to say that we did invite J.T. Arnold to submit a proposal, and they declined. So it wasn't like we tried to just push them out. They declined to make a proposal, so that was their choice. Okay.
Have you called all the references?
I haven't called any references, no.
Would you be willing to do that? Or do you think that's needed? I mean, I don't think I'm going to take the time to call each one.
I certainly could if you'd like. Typically, it's like with resumes, the references they have are going to be good.
Right.
Now, what I have done, and I can share that, I've shared that with Councilmember Smith, is I've contacted some people that aren't references and just got some thoughts, and I'd be really
That's
happy to
probably
share
a better way
those
to go
with you.
anyway.
Yeah. Maybe during the discussion time, when you're finalizing who it is that you feel are your top candidate or candidates, I can share some of the information that I received.
Okay, very good. So we're going to meet at 6:30 on the 5th of March.
Yes.
Here in this room, right?
Yes.
Okay. Presentation, 10-minute
minutes.
presentation, 20-minute discussion, and we'll move along, so we'll be done in 2 hours.
Right. That's our hope.
Might be a little ambitious.
Okay, hope springs eternal, right? All right, well, let's move on then to the marketing, and I don't know, do we have time to do this? I don't know how much time we need for this.
Yeah, Jack and I were actually talking earlier. If it's okay with you, we're already 10 minutes or 2 hours in, and so we were just going to follow up with some of the things that you all heard at the last council meeting or at the last workshop. But again, I think if we have a new member in the next couple weeks, then at our next workshop, maybe we could tag onto that so that they could hear that as well. Because the two things we want to talk about is obviously Jackie's going to talk about open records. And more importantly to you guys, though, the council meeting, executive sessions, open records, emails, those types of things. And then I was going to talk about land that we have and things like that. So it'd probably be good for this last candidate to be there to listen to that as well. So unless you really want to hear us, and I've got a presentation that I could run through for you, but I'm fine holding that until we get a full council.
Okay. Anything else we need to discuss? If not, I'd say we're dismissed. Have a good evening. Thank you for your time and working through those difficult discussions. So, have a good evening.